So, welcome to the OCD North Carolina lecture series. For this month's installment, we have a wonderful speaker who is also on the board with us and is former president of OCD North Carolina and actually one of the founding members of OCD North Carolina. And so I'm very excited to welcome Jeff. Jeff Sapyta is a licensed psychologist and an associate professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Duke University School of Medicine, where he has served for the past 19 years. His research has focused on improving treatment approaches for OCD, anxiety, and depression. He's also a founding board member of OCD North Carolina, which is an affiliate of the International OCD Foundation. And he currently provides care for clients with OCD, anxiety, and tic disorders, as well as training psychology and psychiatry learners in evidence-based behavioral approaches. Um, Jeff is awesome. We're very excited to have him, and I will clam up and turn it over to him. Jeff, thanks for being here.
Uh, Thanks for inviting me, Ben, and thanks to everyone for coming. I'm Jeff Sapyta, and like Ben mentioned, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and I've been doing research and training at Duke for nearly 20 years. Um, my research is focused on improving treatment for conditions like OCD, and professionally, how to better communicate the known science about what makes therapy work to both clients and psychotherapy trainees committed to helping folks in these communities. Um, it's an absolute honor to be here as part of the OCD North Carolina lecture series. Um, Ben may have never mentioned, but this has been something he's wanted to do and be a part of our community for a long time. And the reason why this is happening is from Ben's efforts and um, to get this started. And so as I was thinking about the talk I was going to give today, I decided to make a talk about not something that I'm actually an expert in already, but rather something that I had found deeply interesting already aware was very important to the work and would give me the extra motivation to get deeper into all the recent research on this topic. And so after getting ready to this talk today, I can tell you wholeheartedly that I believe that this topic remains immensely interesting and difficult to summarize in an hour. It's relevant to the OCD community, and I'm still not an expert on this topic by any means. But I hope I can provide a relevant introduction to this topic and perhaps start a discussion that we can grow into more than just a lecture over time. And before we get started, I'm just kind of wondering about our audience in terms of like how many folks here are part of the community in terms of helping clients with OCD, just with like a sense of hands. I can see three of them in my window, but we have a few. Um, and just kind of the relative balance between people who um, are caring for folks with OCD, which would also include folks who are caregivers of someone with OCD, um, versus people who actually experience it on a daily basis. Mm. I don't have a great sense of seeing that. I don't know if you can, Ben, but to that degree, I could be moving forward in this discussion. Now, while we're talking, please, if you have questions, please let me know. But there are often things that I can kind of slow down and focus on if they're more of deeply interested to people. Um, you know, and, and so I have some breaks in there that we'll also have some time that we can kind of slow down and and you know catch people up or talk about things in a deeper way. But first, as you know, you were signing up for this lecture. We're going to be talking about interoception, this sense of our current internal state of our body. So I kind of want to just get started with a brief mindfulness exercise on your interoceptive awareness today in this moment. So for the next few moments, if you're comfortable doing so, I'd like you to close your eyes and tune into your internal sensations. Um, and to begin with, just kind of feel the air moving through your nostrils as you breathe, and perhaps the rise and fall of your chest or belly. There's no right or wrong way of experiencing this. Just notice it. And while you're doing that, maybe also tune into kind of just zooming out to your entire body from head to toe and notice any tension, warmth, tingling. Um, can you maybe feel your stomach gurgling or experience your heartbeat right now? How about hunger or thirst right now? How can you tell? And if you can, what is your body signaling exactly? Do you have any pain or stiffness in your body? And how can you tell that? How is your body signaling that right now? And each of these little signals that you may be tuning into, can you tell where in your body the boundary of each of these signals are? Where in your body these signals are the strongest and centered, and where do they end? And maybe you begin again. And remember, there's no right or wrong answer. Just embrace how your body is talking to you right now. And if your mind wanders a little bit, just acknowledge that and try to tune back into your body. Some of us are really good at kind of going right back into our head as soon as we check into this place. So the goal here is just to practice observing whatever is happening inside. All right, thanks for taking that moment. I wonder in the chat, or people can kind of come online too if they want, but note where this is being recorded about what people kind of noticed right now in terms of what their body was signaling to them. And Ben, I don't know if you can tell, I'm trying to look in my heads up display if I can see the chat or if
Yeah,
people are so brave.
we have a hungry, we have a achy from overdoing it at the gym. I was in the
Uh-huh.
process of writing hungry
Thank you,
as
Amy.
well. I was
Uh-huh.
debating whether or not to eat dinner before or after, and I chose after, and I'm noticing what that feels like.
hmm Very good. So these are ways you can kind of tap into this, and we all kind of know our way a little bit to some degree. I mean, there's a continuum on this about how we tune into things like hunger, like thirst. Sometimes people get, especially in the neurodivergent community, can really lose touch with these things. They really get into things and forget to eat or drink for hours and hours. Um, Lisa, thank you. Tight shoulders and neck from computer work, related muscles in arms and legs, and a full stomach. Lovely. Um, and what's interesting about this is, as you guys are describing this, you're sort of aware of a signal, and you're pretty linked to the context of where that may be coming from. They're not scary. They're not disturbing. But maybe when people are having signals that they're not used to tuning into, or they just kind of lose track of where those signals might be, that they may be um, much more concerning, either to really attend to or to ignore. And so the objectives for today is talking about interoception and how does that work? How does interoception impact emotions? Um, And because this is, a talk for the OCD community, how interoception may be related directly to how OCD manifests and how people experience it. Um, and then I had to make some choices in terms of like what to do in this hour, and maybe we can expand it at some point somewhere, is how we can recalibrate our interoception to be more connected with ourselves. And there's some really obviously there's been some great work in this in the OCD treatment community, as well as in other treatment communities like occupational therapy and physical therapy. All right. Well, interoception has been coined our eighth sense, which obviously includes the five senses that we know. Um, the other two, if you want to win at bar trivia, is our vestibular sense, or like our sense of balance, and our proprioception, our ability to kind of like know our awareness of our body in space and how it relates to other things in space. Gymnasts and competitive dancers are geniuses in this way. And simply put, interoception, it's our ability to sense internal states of our body. So it enables us to experience essential feelings such as hunger, fullness, thirst, itch, pain, body temperature, nausea, need for the bathroom, tickling, physical exertion, and even sexual arousal. So all of these kind of the ways that our body communicates these things. And very importantly, there's a bidirectional communication between these body sensations and higher level cognitions. We certainly are aware that sometimes we can be prompted to respond to these signals, but sometimes, but in a lot of cases, our brain in its ways, once it's receiving the signals, it's already doing things. It's already responding to it based on what we've learned about what that signal means and what could be useful. Um, and we'll get into that. We this can be trained, and if calibrated optimally, interoception gives us the ability to identify, assess, understand, and respond appropriately to the internal signals of our body, and provides a distinct advantage to engage in life challenges if we could do that optimally. Um, so for our neuroscientists in here, I'm going to really out myself as not being an expert, but I think it's important to kind of talk about kind of, if you open up the hood and kind of look at like how do we sense these things, and really there is like a mechanical chemical element going on. So it's a bidirectional system. So we have senses that are sensory, ways that we're sensing things on our skin, in our specific organs, like what my lower GI is doing, what my heart is doing, um, things like that. And it goes up into the interocept. It go, goes up in these ascending pathways. On the second slide, I'm about to get into, this is where the magic is made, the regulatory systems. Um, Insert hand waving here for this author, but we'll get into it. But essentially, through your messages from your spinal cord and your vagal nerve can describe these sensations as it kind of goes up to the brain for processing, and eventually, based on how the sausage is made, can then be down regulated to kind of change body uh, systems. Things like, because of the information I'm getting, I'm going to drop adrenaline right now or cortisol, or I'm going to slow my heart rate down because, or direct blood flow to the gut because we're eating now. So all these things are important. Now, the primary signals from the organs and tissue travel up the spinal cord and brainstem to the brain. And within the brain, our interoceptive information is often first processed in subcortical structures, so like our midbrain, um, including part of the thalamus. And if you don't know about your thalamus, appreciate one thing about your thalamus today. Um, the thalamus is sort of like our brain's live television director. We're about to go into March Madness, right? So like you you've seen that, and some of those games they have like 15 different cameras going on, and this director is like, like go to camera one where we're seeing the action, go to camera three where that the coach is now yelling at the ref. Um, just bank on it. Every game at the end there'll be a camera looking at sad co-ed whose team just lost. Like that's like a good trope on this. But basically, there's a choice that the thalamus is getting all of this information, and like, what is the most salient, what is the most important, and pays attention to that. Now, once once the thalamus has kind of gotten a hold of like what's important, it goes into our insula, the insular cortex, and this is a very important part in many ways. But the basically the back end, the posterior, the purple part, kind of integrates like the information which is getting from the vagus nerve, it's getting from the spinal cord, and it's also getting this information from your somatosensory cortex. And then those ingredients it gives to the front end of your insula, your anterior insular cortex, which makes sense of it. What does this mean? Um, and so interoception is first processed, in the back, goes to the front. Um, and as you can see on the left side, may does involve other more like cortex complicated related things, involves our memories of things, involves our rules and our values of things, as it kind of decides what do these signals mean. And according to kind of Craig's model about this, basically the posterior insula receives the raw data, like the stomach is contracting, my heart is 110, beats per minute, and the anterior insula produces a subjective feeling, I feel nauseous and jittery right now. Now, I want to kind of overlay, if you can kind of like take a snapshot of the left side that's kind of including all of when we make meaning of it to our OCD circuitry, and you're seeing there's a lot of the similar structures that are in play here. So the circuits involved in interoception are heavily involved in individuals with OCD. And in terms of when you look at functional MRI and ways where they're looking at brain activity, your brain doesn't actually turn red or orange or yellow, but it can show that it's busy. It's busier right now. And folks with OCD often have overactivity in these areas. And if you have OCD, you've known that experience where you're having a rough day, that you can really feel mentally fatigued, like my mind's been working very hard today, and it's often in these centers. And recent research suggests the OCD circuit is well integrated within the striatum and thalamus, which we talked about a little bit, and they are really important for learning, changing habits about things, and incorporating emotional data into our learning for the day. So there was a lot of pictures, but here's the key things just to kind of pull away from this. Interoceptive sensations are first sent to the brain. These sensations are prioritized for awareness by our TV director, the good old thalamus. The posterior IC organizes these senses, then produces our experience of sensation. And where before we get meaning to it, most of these sensations are pretty much experienced as, is this intense or kind of weak, and is it pleasant or unpleasant? Usually this is about kind of the binary sensations that people have. Then your anterior insula interprets those sensations at time with help of higher order brain regions, and makes a call on what the sensation means. What emotion am I feeling? Now, what's really important about this, and what Craig has argued for 20 years, is that the insula and this whole system here really forms the basis for our sense of embodied sense of self. Like, how am I feeling? How do I feel about this? Um, uh, do I like certain things? Do I believe in certain things? And this idea is influential. It means our sense of I exist is tied to sensing our flesh and blood, literally. And for clinicians, underscores why people feel emotionally numb or disconnected sometimes. It's common in depression and some OCD, folks with a trauma history, where they may even often describe not feeling real. Their interoceptive connection is part of feeling alive, and when they're numb to it, they can really lose a sense of themselves. Any questions so far or comments? All right. A little bit more on kind of that emotional component. If anyone is interested in this topic, this is an amazing book, which really has shown how we've in psychological science have really kind of changed our way of thinking about how emotions are made and processed. Lisa Feldman Barrett is also pretty active on the podcast and YouTube scene. So, you can see multiple TED Talks, and, she's launched many careers in kind of emotional science, talking about how interoception, how our conceptions of emotion that you may have learned in a Psych 100 textbook are actually not correct. Um, a lot of what we came to understand is like that we have universal emotions. We can look at a picture with someone with like a smiley face, and every culture on earth could say that that's a happy person, and someone with like a frown is like, like an angry person. But when you actually look at, when you're tying to like people in a physiological sense, and they're reporting, you know when they're feeling angry, when they're feeling happy, um, what they express is very different. It's just variable. So, we understand that, like, we can all agree when someone is trying to look like someone who's happy or sad, but when someone is actually angry, they may not have a scowl. They actually may get really quiet or cunning. They may actually laugh more when they're angry as like a response. A lot of learned different things. So when you're actually looking at the truth about what people are actually feeling, um, there really is this sense that, people, get signals from their body, um, and those gut feelings that they have are interpreted by our past experience and our situational cues. Um, and often our emotions, are basically interpreted based on these vague signals. Um, and they feel very real to us at all times, of course, but the cause of them could be really ambiguous. For example, a quick heartbeat might mean anxiety or excitement, because of something in front of you, or the extra beverage of caffeine we forgot we had an hour ago. So sometimes, and the more research you look at, you can really see that um, we often know, we can get a sense of what we're feeling, but drawing connections to what's really making that happen, we're not as good as identifying. But we're always guessing. That's our adaptive brain working. Um, and so, because the brain does not directly know the cause, it only knows the sensation itself. It uses the past experience and situational cues to interpret and categorize these situations. So if someone is really in danger, or if someone's on a roller coaster, their body may be reacting in the same way. They may be having high heart rate, drop in cortisol. They may be sweating a little bit, like they're in a threatened way. But certainly with the context, people can make sense of why that's happening. All right. Any questions on any of this before moving forward? All right, and I'll pause a little less, but if you're just having thoughts, just throw them in the chat, and I found the chat box so I can get back to them as we go. Now that we better understand how interoception is a key driver of our experience and the interpretation of emotion, it's no wonder that it has major influence over mental health. And numerous mental health issues involve some sort of interoceptive dysfunction. And OCD is certainly in this category, but it also includes depression, panic disorder, PTSD, eating disorders, and substance use disorders. And when we talk about dysfunction, there's a continuum there where, for some folks, it may be that um, they're not tapping into their body enough. They're not really having a sense of that, or they may be tapping into their body too much, and so different manifestations could happen. So before we get into how interoception directly relates to OCD, I just kind of want to talk about kind of some important constructs here. So interoceptive awareness is our conscious ability to recognize at all, differentiate if it's good or bad, and respond to internal body signals. Like in the same way that you may have kind of people in your life that are like love music or they love wine, and they can kind of describe all of these nuances to the palate of a certain wine that I can't pick up on. I'm a little bit more on the musical side that I could pick up different flavors and tones and things like that. But people will have this is on a continuum. And it's one thing for the body and brain to process an internal signal, but it's another to be aware of it at all, accurately interpret it, and use it to guide behavior. And a useful definition that came from Craig back in the day was this interoceptive awareness is the ability to identify, access, understand, and appropriately respond to the patterns of internal signals. So noticing when your heart is pounding, your stomach is churning, being able to label that sensation, my heart is racing, or a vague unease somewhere, understanding what it might mean. So I'm anxious about the meeting that I'm about to have, or I'm excited about a certain thing without immediately misinterpreting or overreacting to it, and then choosing an adaptive response. Um, the combination of what goes into interoceptive awareness is our accuracy of it. um and again, this is only an hour lecture, but there's a long it's an interesting discussion about how we understand interoceptive accuracy, because we don't have a lot of good ways of measuring it or manipulating it. But one that we have is your heartbeat. So a lot of this research, we're not going to get really into it, but a lot of this research is about um, your ability to kind of like tune into your heart and say with specificity how many beats per minute is my heart currently beating. Um, there's a lot of research and folks in the panic community, research community who look at this. Certainly, when we're talking about OCD, it's a little. It doesn't. It sometimes can, but it doesn't always involve our heart rate, right? That they have different sensations. Um, but to really understand interoceptive awareness, and when we get better on the research on this for the OCD community, um, looking at other ways we could tap into um you know some what someone is experiencing and what they might actually be going on. So we have this accuracy bit, and then we also have our intersensitive sensibility. So it's our subjective experience, which often includes and is really relevant for the OCD community is the confidence of one's interoceptive ability. Do these vague feelings I'm having, does it give me more certainty about what I'm doing is helping me? Or do I feel like more doubt now because I'm having these kind of feelings? Um, and and then your attitude toward interoceptive sensations at all. So looking at if our body is kind of communicating us these things, what's our attitude toward it? And are there certain sensations we have in our body that we don't like hearing from? We don't mind hearing from other parts of our body, but when we're talking about this, I don't want to think about that at all. Um, or you spend a lot of energy trying not to think about it. And we'll talk about the manifestations of that soon. But just that general attitude of um, are these interoceptive sensations at least you're open to kind of experiencing them, or when they come up at all, we're immediately trying to tamp them down. And then we have this other element of anxiety sensitivity, the fear of feeling fear. Right. So, and there's obviously a lot of research, and much of this research has been driven by, um, again, in anxious populations, panic disorder populations, where they've labeled it anxiety sensitivity. Maybe as we get other populations more incorporated into this research, maybe we'll say something different about it. Maybe it'd be like interoceptive sensitivity, but as a concept, it still is relevant to the OCD community of this kind of um, not wanting and actually being driven to avoid things, or maybe engage in compulsions, not because of a feared consequence, but just for that feeling itself. And in your experience, either working with folks, or you may have it that when you talk about, so why are you worried about, like, why are you fearful? What's the feared consequence? They may not even really get there. They're just like, I don't know, it's just gross, or it's really uncomfortable. So they're just like really focused on the sensation bit. Now, like I had mentioned before, interoception awareness is on a spectrum. And there are good reasons in our lives where, this may be our tuning of it, maybe a little bit more to, being a little bit more hypersensitive, or reduced interoceptive. But reduced interoceptive awareness, these are under attuned to bodily signals, and they're related to issues like depression and PTSD. Individuals with major depression, for example, often have difficulty identifying their feelings and bodily states. The nerd word for this is alexithymia, or low inner awareness. And chronic trauma survivors might actually detach from bodily sensations, even to the point of dissociation, as a protective mechanism. Again, this is a way that when the environment for a time is too overstimulating, um, we can't differentiate, everything is high, that our body will try to numb that. So we could differentiate from the moderate to the high by just numbing it down. But while this blunting can shield someone from pain or anxiety in the short term, it compromises the ability to process and regulate emotions if that goes on too long. And the result can be emotional numbness, difficulty knowing one's needs, and a sense of disconnection from themselves. Features seen in some depression and complex trauma cases. Now, in OCD, although less common than hyperawareness, some patients may initially fail to notice internal stress signals and then feel suddenly overwhelmed by anxiety that came out of nowhere, which can reinforce a feeling of lack of control. Now, heightened interoceptive awareness, being overattuned, is frequently observed in anxiety disorders, and certainly in OCD presentations. And here, individuals are too aware of bodily sensations, often misinterpreting benign sensations as threats. And in panic disorder, for example, a normal variation in heart rate might be perceived as, I'm about to have a heart attack, triggering a panic attack. Um, Now, not, interoception and OCD, not all obsessive content is outcome based, as I kind of alluded to previously. Not all the compulsions that people may do serve to prevent a feared outcome, rather soothing an uneasy feeling they're having right now. And especially if you have folks who um, ha- have OCD in the the just right neighborhood, where sometimes they wash or tap and things like that, for a couple more minutes, and sometimes 10, is because they're trying to reach some homeostasis there. So they may be preventing some unlucky thing from happening, but in the moment they are really wrestling with these interoceptive sensations. And so compulsions are often satisfied by sensory or visceral feedback. I mean, in their head, washing their hands a lot, they know it's clean logically, and now it feels clean because I did it more. And it's driven by this need to get back to homeostasis. Um, and although, and especially in my training early on, we can talk about obsessions as really a lot of thoughts, and ways we structure fear and make sense of that. When you ask people specifically about what we call sensory phenomenon, 50 to 80% of patients report sensory phenomenon that the compulsions directly relieve. Um, Now, there's different types of sensory phenomenon people can feel, and they certainly link on and map on to um, the stories people have about how their obsessions and compulsions are linked, certainly informed by our values. I always say OCD, if people are if it's taking hold, is either taking hold in something that you really care about, what you're good at, or what you're working on like something new. And so when laid on with these sensory phenomenon here, it can lead to certain, categorical, differences in how their OCD manifests. So not just right experiences, this feeling of out of balance and symmetry and order. So people, are maybe pushed by kind of feelings they have in their hands as they're engaging in something, or in their feet um, as they're kind of dealing with the obsessions they're experiencing. Feelings of disgust. So obviously, we can think of feeling disgust as like a nauseous feeling you feel in your stomach, but you can also feel it. For example, a very common manifestation if someone is like really aware of their environment, they just wash their hands, they know they're clean, they are keeping aware that their hands aren't touching anything, they're keeping their hands up, but then someone brushes against them, they can really feel the exact contact point on their skin of where that happened. They know where it is. They're paying attention to it. And not only does that feel aversive, but because of how they're putting meaning to it, now their hand feels dirty right there, just there. Um, but feelings of disgust can also be in different places. It's a vague feeling. Sometimes people can feel uh, dirty, like kind of in their head. Like, I mean, we don't have sensory neurons like on in our brain, but people can talk about like feeling like a dullness or an uneasiness that's kind of like behind my eyes or on top of my head, not on my skin. It's like kind of you know more in there. Feelings and obsessions, this can happen a lot with certainly disgust, but also just kind of harm related obsessions, kind of a feeling of vague foreboding or doom, like there's something weird here, I need to do something. There's bad juju here, I gotta do something to like put something out in the universe to cancel this out. And they can have this like creepy feeling felt being in that obsessional fear. And then feelings of guilt or pressure to intervene. And sometimes these are centered. I ask a lot of people about this for a long time, and often, when people really have a sense of like over-identified responsibility, they need to do something, or they feel guilty about doing something, they can kind of feel in the same place when in the same part of their body where they feel like they just got caught doing something bad. Like if they were when they were a kid and they got busted for something, this sort of like sinking feeling, this dropped feeling, or feeling condemned. And so sometimes people can kind of feel like a lump in their throat or like a drop in their chest often. Now, why does interoception change? Um, so why do people, some have blunted interoceptive awareness and others hypersensitive? Um, there's two major models of this. Um, the allostatic model, which was kind of brought in by like kind of the physiology researchers, it describes how chronic stress wears down our body regulation systems. And under repeated stress, our allostatic mechanisms, which basically are about how our body can meet our needs. Um, this is different than homeostasis. Allostasis is sort of like how much energy do I need to get the thing I want or I need. Or homeostasis is just like that feeling of balance or neutrality, are overengaged. For example, if someone lives in constant anxiety in the allostatic load model, their body might maintain a chronically high cortisol level, elevated heart rate, and eventually the system may fail to bounce back to a healthy baseline, leading to either persistently high arousal or a crash into low responsiveness. Um, and this can lead your baseline interoception to shift in unhealthy ways. And again, if you're in chronic stress, chronic trauma, I mean, just to preserve the organism and be ready for hoping that the environment changes, we kind of numb out and don't respond because the pain is too is too excessive and sustained. Now, the adaptive calibration model is has a little bit less of like this thing calibrates in trauma, but basically it tunes in and tunes out all the time. And our stress response and interoceptive awareness in adaptive ways. It may be problematic as your environment changes, but you know, with if you're sort of open to that, this may be linked to your environment and not just like an internal sensation that I have to relieve. People can have a different relationship with it. And in both of these models, they're very clear. Interoceptive awareness is malleable. It comes online, and it changes over time based on our environment. All right. Any thoughts or questions, things that people find interesting? So far, so good. Right. Now, how can we recalibrate our interoceptive awareness? Um, we know there are ways that we can help, that helps for folks who have anxiety, have OCD, have depression. These are different things, and it's interesting to kind of think about it, in this sort of lens of your relationship with your body and how your body talks to you. So, as a way of thinking about recalibrating our interception, I want to try on the concept that you and your body have been in this lifelong relationship together, and you've been together as long as you can remember, right? And just like any relationship, the one with our own body can have its ups and downs. Times where our communication dynamics can get a little strained, like that time when you took on that extra role or responsibility and you forgot to respond to your body when it was needing a little help and kind of communicating to you. Um, so, you know, so in the spirit, we can always be better in our relationships. Answer for yourself. Do you have a healthy relationship right now with your body? Or are there some ways that, maybe we can have like a communication tune up? You both on speaking terms at all? I hope you are. Do you respond well to your body when it tries to communicate with you? Or do you ignore important signals or have poor boundaries around the less important ones? Some signs that maybe your relationship with your body needs some work. Do you have trouble listening to your body communicating the start of trouble? Um, for example, do you only notice your body talking to you when you're already feeling rage or you're already crying or you're just exhausted? Like that's the first sign. I felt, like I felt ambushed by it. Um, but certainly exhaustion, for, you know, has signals that maybe we're less in tune with. Are you waiting for your body to talk to you like it used to? Oh, sorry. I was sharing with Ben. My phone always wants to take the camera away. Right, I'm back. Um, and are you waiting? And then finally, and certainly when you see people who might be stuck, they're really depressed. They want to get better, but are you, sometimes are you waiting for your body to talk to you first like it used to do? Not how it is now, but I'm kind of waiting for a signal before I can act. But you admit, even though you're kind of waiting for having the relationship you used to have, you admit that you have not been contributing to the relationship in a while. You haven't been trying to like enhance dialogue between you and your body. So, when you are in this category of reduced interoceptive awareness, you're not experiencing signals even if you're trying to look for them. Um, one way to do this, which I've certainly seen in the occupational therapy literature, so when you feel an important body signal, respond to it. The first thing you can do when you've had a long, like, you've been good friends with someone that you've lost contact with, is like respond to their texts promptly. So like when you actually experience that body signal, respond to it as quickly as you can. Um, and after you respond to it, notice what your body says next. So, I mean, this may be an example where, people aren't tracking, because they get hyper focused. They get, yes, I will, Susan. Um, after, notice what you're, like after you respond to it. I mean, sorry, back it up. So if you know, and certainly folks who aren't in tune with it may rely on external ways, and certainly populations in OCD do this all the time. Like I don't feel like I can trust what my body is telling me about what's safe or clean, so I'm going to use a clock, or I'm going to use count, like kind of mental counting, or different things. They're not tuning into their body; they're using a different thing. But when for example, you've like, I haven't eaten in 6 hours. I've been like, even if you're like having fun, um, that's a sign that maybe you can have some communication with your body. So when you finally sit down and start eating, or taking that first sip, can you sense any gratitude from your body for showing up for it? Don't judge it. Just get reacquainted to the signal. Just kind of notice, because like if you haven't been talking to a friend that you were very close to at one point, your initial signals of hey might just be like, hey, coming back. It may take a minute, but tune into it, and then take every opportunity to tune in your body when you know it's happy that you're doing something. And then take opportunity daily to do pleasurable activities, even if they feel muted. This is something that we do for folks who are depressed, behavioral activation, right? We get a sense of someone's values, what's important to them, what they used to enjoy doing, music, food. And what you try to do is over time, get in front of those things, do those things, because that over time kind of, if you can think of anhedonia as like kind of like a membrane around our body, that like, everybody else is laughing at the joke and I used to, but I'm not laughing anymore. Being closer to the campfire will kind of thin that over time. And so, take every opportunity you can to you know to be in front of things that you knew at one point felt really good, and over time, you can get more in tune with that. Now, if you're hyper aware, these things are too loud. First thing we just want to ask is like a vulnerability question. How resourced are you? Um, if this is kind of coming on or comes on at certain times, am I rested? And have I not been tracking fatigue? Am I nourished? Have I not been moving or doing? Have I not been moving I've just been sitting in a chair for hours doing the same task? Take care of these for yourself. And if you are kind of hyper aware, you have like a laser pointer kind of focused on sort of a hot spot on your body that you don't like feeling, or you're always being kind of a goalie about, being on guard for it flaring up. How can you zoom out to include other signals without distracting yourself? So including that signal, but also kind of zooming out, and things like grounding exercises or a body scan, where you can practice shifting attention to a broader range of sensations, where you can practice include other sensory input along with the sticky ones. And then engage in paced breathing, yoga, meditation, that can reduce stress and strengthen a more balanced stance of attention. These things certainly help when we're in kind of a fried sort of state, can help initiate, the parasympathetic nervous system ramping down, while also a lot of great attention to not just this, but different parts of your body. Now, how can we incorporate interoception specifically in OCD treatment? Have you ever seen a talk from me? I always bring this up because the first session I'm ever with someone with OCD, even if we got a few days to a few sessions ahead of us to really do a good evaluation, I want to give them a 30,000-foot view of what OCD looks like when they're struggling, and maybe how ERP could look a little differently. Um, because no matter what type of OCD someone has, it always runs the same play. Um, Here, I'll be able to take some time discussing the differences between triggers and obsessions and compulsions. There's some good psychoed here. and how folks may not be upset much by OCD content at all at this when they start their day, but at some point they get triggered. And when they get triggered, the obsession part content comes on fast and strong at the speed of light. There's no time to react to it. You get triggered and boom, it's there. Um, and and those can include thoughts and sensations. Now, the compulsions, and this is another good reason why I talk about this and have this view, because some people can feel a lot of shame about why they get stuck doing these silly things they may say, because I know it doesn't make sense. And the reason why compulsions remain seductive and hard to stop is even if one with OCD knows it doesn't make sense, when they engage in that compulsion, they immediately feel relief. And so I kind of write out like a sawtooth pattern when someone's really having kind of a like a hard time with OCD. Um, and you can be engaging that over and over again. And you may use something like this too, but ask yourself, like, what exactly are they getting relief from in that moment? Is it from the fear or the feeling? Sometimes it's both, but sometimes someone's fear of like getting contaminated is not going to change. That they they entered the day and they exited the day not wanting to get sick. But the drive to do compulsions is a little bit more of a present moment, real time kind of experience. And that's where you can really open up and talk about interoceptive experiences. Um, Now, when I get people mapping these things, using that dialogue, I could have highlighted this, but basically, the first two columns is kind of like team trigger, you know, and then the next two are obsessions, like their distress goes up, and both of these things are happening at the speed of light. And what I really try to do and help people with, like, yes, you may have these thoughts. Um, you're not choosing to say a thing or direct something, but they're just like immediately in your head. Um, but if they can put a SUDS number on their distress, you need a, it's an opportunity to help them kind of like when you start feeling it, where do you notice that in your body exactly? How strong is it? And if they say something like 4 out of 10, something you can ask is like, well, why not 8 out of 10 right now? What feels different about those two? Like sometimes you have eight, sometimes you have four. How do you know, like in your body? And again, we're talking to folks who really struggle with doubt, and so you really want to help them. Thank you, Ben. um, we can really help them talk about, we don't need to know precisely, but just kind of in the range, in the neighborhood, where are you feeling these things? And where maybe like when because being upset with OCD is rarely in your toes. And as we talked about before, it can kind of center at least a good part of it somewhere between the pit of your stomach and the top of your head. Where is it for you? And where do you feel it? Because according to current emotional research, um, with part of your obsession may just be a sensation, and because of our values, or again, what we're good at, what we're working on, we can make stories about what that means. It's been so many times where I'm talking about people who are like, really focused on where they're stepping. They may actually be really good at dance, or they were like a competitive gymnast, like they're really in tune to those things. Um, and the list goes on and on, but Ben is making me aware of the time. So ERP and interoception awareness, ERP can be thought of a way of tuning down hyper awareness of interoceptive signals. Um, and it's consistent with inhibitory learning, which, if you're aware of this, that we don't do exposures to get used to, or like that these signals go to the wayside, we don't feel them anymore, but we actually develop a different relationship to them, that this signal doesn't always mean danger. And if I can start being a little bit more flexible in my reaction to it, maybe even doing a lot less compulsions, that experience is going to change by itself without me having to over control or pay attention to it so much. Um, and so, we ERP can help reevaluate the meaning of our body's communication style. And ERP can be enhanced with incorporating interoceptive exposure. John Abramowitz, across the way, and some of his colleagues have really written some great stuff on how, kind of borrowing from the panic disorder folks, where if you can get a sense of someone's interoceptive experience of obsessions, you can add that to your exposures. So where can we replicate this sinking feeling or a lump in your chest or dizziness if you feel that. Mindfulness. Mindfulness interventions can complement ERP, develop a more balanced relationship to these triggers. Mindfulness both retrains your attention in interoceptive cues and makes your reactions more flexible. Noticing and not engaging in compulsions, I would say technically is a type of exposure. You're working less hard. You're having a more flexible interaction. I have another choice. I can notice something and not have to fix it right now, not have to neutralize it. I can kind of see what happens. And we know that mindfulness in the brain and very little mindfulness, by the way. So some of these interventions are 8 weeks long, 20 minutes a day. You're seeing changes in the brain and how people can kind of pay attention. And really important for things like ADHD and GAD. There's a lot of really great benefit of doing this kind of attention retraining. So we're out of time, but if I had a day to talk about this, I'd talk more. So part of this could be like treatment planning for OCD clients with reduced interoceptive awareness. Um, we know that ERP is not really effective for folks who are severely depressed. And sometimes people have thought, well, maybe this is because they're just not motivated, or they don't have the energy to. But I think an alternative explanation, once we're kind of looking at this lens, is maybe their interoceptive awareness is so dulled that even when they do exposures, and I've seen this in my practice, that it's hard for them to feel a difference, to notice a difference. Or they just have like this vague signal that doesn't make it motivating to kind of keep doing it. They don't get that aha surprise. So helping someone, certainly the state of the art now is treat severe depression before you start ERP, but maybe some of the things you can do with behavioral activation is really, do some of this interoceptive awareness enhancement to kind of help them with that. And there's some promising therapies in the occupational therapy literature for somatic conditions, neurodiversity, of targeting interoception as a direct outcome, mindfulness, awareness, and body-oriented therapy. Again, I need to read a little bit more about this because this is used in kind of modalities like occupational physical therapy, massage therapy. I don't think I'm trained to touch my clients in any way, but sometimes they do know a direct way to help people with interoceptive experience is by touch. So if people are having a vague sense of their body, and they've consented, and things are good, that part of it could help them by actually like placing your hand on the place that they can't feel their chest, they can't feel certain things, and being able to like put your hands in a place where you can add a little bit of non-sensual pressure. They can be able to sort of sense that a little bit more and enhance that. Well, that's all I have. Any final thoughts or questions?
Thank you, Jeff.